So that's what we're going to do next to learn how to crop or resize these images. Okay, so to do that, we're going to create, let's create an external file that will contain the function for cropping and or resizing. Okay, so let me go to this folder and just delete these files that have been uploaded, because as you can see, it has created a folder called uploads. Okay, and then inside here, this is where the files are housed. So let me just delete these files, or I could leave them for reference, I think, for now. So in here, let's create one file. Now I'm going to go to my editor and say new file, and let me save this file. Let me save this one as crop.php. You can save it any name you want, just make sure it says all files here and hit save. All right, so in here we are going to have only PHP. So let me do that, echo PHP and close. So here I want to just to see that I have included this file, because we have to include this file. Let me just tell it to echo something and just say here, for example. That's all we have. Now inside our PHP, our index page, we go right at the top and we type include. Okay. So let's include, actually let's not use include, let's use require. That's much better, so that without this file, nothing should run. So we say require, this file is called crop.php. So in order for this to work, this file has to be right in the same directory as the index page. If it's not, if it's in another folder, make sure you type in the full address here. Okay, like for example, folder / whatever folder it's in there. But for our purposes, it's right there. So this should work. So in order to know that it has worked, let's refresh the page. And you see here, which is being echoed from the crop. All right, so now let's put some cool stuff in here that will help us to crop our images. So to start with, obviously we have to name the function. So let's create a function and name it. So let me say function. Wow, that's something else. Okay, function, let's name the function crop, like that. Okay, something like that. Let me put some space over there. Okay, now here we're going to put a few, what do we call these? A few arguments. Yeah, I almost forgot that. Arguments that we're going to use inside this function. So I already typed these arguments, and so let me just copy them and explain them. Okay, so the first argument, this is a variable called original image path. Okay, this is the original image path because the function has to know where this image is that we want to crop. And then resized image path, this is the output file that we've created after cropping. So these can be different, they don't have to be the same file. Then the max width that we want and the maximum height that we want, and we give it a mode here. Mode is equal to resize and crop. Okay, so anyway, the mode here has got a value. As you can see, these others don't have values, but this one has a value because this makes it optional. We don't have to supply a value because there's a default value here. So this can work as an optional. So mode is there because we want the same function to be able to resize and crop, or simply resize or simply crop. So you have to type in what you want there so that it's a multi-purpose function. All right, enough talk, let's keep moving on. So to start with, first of all, let's check the file extension of this file that we have loaded from the original path. All right, so we've already seen how to do that. I'm not going to bother explaining this because it's the same process as previously. So once we get our extension, now we have to do certain things depending on that extension that we got. So if the extension is equal to JPG, which means this is a JPEG, or the extension is JPEG, it's still a JPEG. So we'll do something. So here we're going to create an image resource. The reason we create an image resource is because we want to be able to manipulate this image, and we can't manipulate it in its original state, so we have to create an image resource of that image. So that's how you do it. We say image resource is equal to, so to create a resource, we use this function called image create from JPEG. And we pass in the original image path, which is this one here. Okay, so PHP will create an image resource from there, from JPEG. Now, depending on the file extension, if it's not a JPEG, it's a PNG, there's a different function. This is why we're using an if statement. Okay, so I went ahead and typed the rest of them so as to save time. All right, so this doesn't look right. Let me move these a little bit over. So if it's a PNG, there's a function called image create from PNG, from GIF, and so on. Now, if any of these fails, the last resort is just to create it from JPEG, just in case. Okay, so that we don't have an empty image resource by the time we get here. All right. So moving on, and a bonus here is that we are going to we're going to check if the image is oriented wrongly. Then we're going to reorient it, because certain people take images in sideways or portrait or landscape, and the software can determine the orientation and straighten it if need be. All right, so let's go and actually check for the orientation. Now, this orientation straightening only happens with JPEGs. Okay, we don't orient any other file type. So we have to make sure that if the extension is JPEG or that, then we do the orientation that is required. So let's check first of all the orientation of the image right now. Okay, we do that with that if statement. We say if metadata, this is the variable that we've chosen. You can use any variable here. You can name it anything. We use this function called exif read data. Okay, now we pass in the original image path. Now this exif, I think that's what it's called. It brings up a lot of data about orientation, the camera that you are using, and so on and so forth. So this will be an array. So let's check what is contained in that array first. What we are looking for specifically is if the orientation parameter is actually set. So we use the isSet function. We say if isSet metadata orientation. Now take care to actually put a capital O here. That's important. Number is equal to whatever the orientation is. So we have assigned whatever orientation it is to this number. Okay, let me put the closing bracket there. So let's use that number to check and determine what to do after that. So let's let me copy what I have already typed here to speed up time. All right, so what we have here is determine how many degrees to rotate. So if this number is 3, this number that we've gotten, if the orientation is number 3, then it means in order for us to reorient this image, we have to rotate it left 180 degrees. So these are the numbers for and their respective rotations that are required. Okay, so after we've gone through all that reorienting, it's time now to proceed. So let's go down here and proceed. So we haven't actually oriented the image. We've just taken note before we start manipulating the image. We have to take note what the orientation is and save it there. So we continue. Now we are going to start the actual resizing. Okay, so to do that, start actual resizing. So we say original width. We get the original width using this function called image sx. This gets the x. So take note here, we are not getting this from the original file path, but from the image resource. So this is the width of the image, and this is the height of the image taken by image sy. Okay, so we assign original width, original height. Okay, so next we are going to check if there's an error. Okay, so if original width is 0 and original height is 0, which is we're checking by saying not original width or not original height, it means this is actually not a file, so we should return an error. Okay, this is not an image. So in case we have multiple errors, we're going to assign all of them to this array called errors. That's how you create an array, and we say we are assigning this value to an empty, the next available slot in this array. So we are saying this image is not valid, the file name, and we add original image path, because like I said before, we are uploading multiple images, so we have to know which file has had an error. And then we say return errors. So this will ensure that the function exits right here, because if we don't actually have an image to edit, there's no need going forward. Okay, so if everything is good, we are down here, and we also check. This is where we have to do a little bit of math. Okay, so because we have to determine how to calculate where we resize or where we crop. Okay, so to start with, check if the old resolution is equal or smaller than required. Okay, so if the original width is less than or equal to the maximum width, and the same for the height, meaning this image is smaller than what we want, then there's no need to resize. Just retain the dimensions but still create the image resource. Okay, so we assign a new width, because what's happening here is that we have to create a new image resource and then copy the old image to a new image resource in a resized version. So this is what we're doing now. So we'll have two images and we're copying from one to the other, and while we copy to the other, we're going to resize it there and then save the second image. So now the new width that we want to create will simply be equal to the original width, because this is smaller than what we want. So let's just make an image, it's smaller or equal to. So we'll leave it at that. So let's move on. If it's not, if the image we're trying to resize is bigger than what we want, then we move on, because now we need to actually resize it. Okay, so let's check out the ratio of resizing that we actually need. So first of all, our ratio is going to be equal to the maximum width divided by the original width. Okay, so why am I doing this? Let's say, for example, your image is 1000 by 500. Okay, this is the width and this is the height. So we'll look at and then what we actually want is the limit to be 400, because here, first of all, we are resizing. So we want it to be 400 by 200 instead. So what we do is we divide this into that, which will tell us how much of a reduction we need to do, and that is the ratio. Okay, so once we get that ratio, we create a new image from there. Here we are determining the dimensions of the new image. So create a new resolution with the same ratio as original. So we don't want to distort the image, we want it to maintain the ratio. So the new width is equal to max width, okay, that, the maximum width that we want, and then the new height is equal to the original height multiplied by the ratio. All right, so if the ratio, for example, is half, if we are reducing it to half, then the ratio value would be 0.5. So if we multiply the original height by 0.5, it will give us half of that, which is the same value we are reducing with the width. So here we haven't determined whether the width or the height was longer for the image. So in order to check for that, what we have to do is we are going to just check to see what has happened so far. Let me just paste some code here. All right, so if the new height is greater than the maximum height that we want, then we've done it all wrong. Let's do it the other way around. Let's flip and get the ratio as maximum height divided by original height. So the thing here is like this. Let me explain a little bit more. If let's say our image is 1000 by 500 as before, and then we want to reduce it to 500 by 200, which is half Okay, so we're going to make sure this is the limit. The 500 is the limit, so we're going to make sure that this 1000 doesn't go below this or is not bigger. So if it's bigger, then our image is the other way around. It's 500 by 1000, like that. So it means what we have to reduce first is the height instead of the width. Because if we reduce this to 500, this will still be bigger than 200. Okay, anyway, if it doesn't make any sense, just type these things as they are and it's going to work. So we try this way. If the result is bigger than what we want, then we try the height instead of the width. Okay, so there we have, so what we have so far is the ratio of reduction, and then we have the new height and the new width. So let's move on. Now we have to create a new image resource using these new height and new width, so that we copy our old image to this new reduced size image. So we create a new image resource is equal to image create true color. So make sure that this is image create true color and not image create from JPEG like we had done previously. So we are creating a true color image, and then we give it two parameters, the width and the height. So we use new width and new height. Okay, so now let's copy the old image from the old image resource to this one, and then we would have successfully resized. So this is the part where the mod comes in right now. Okay, let me just push this in a little bit. So remember at the top here, we had decided to add a mode. Okay, so this is where it comes in handy now. We have to check now whether we resize or we crop. So if the mode is equal to resize, then we run it here. Okay, so create a new image resource. Actually, this image resource was already created up there, so this is not cool. So let me just comment that out. We don't need this. Let's create it down here using these parameters here. All right, so this is the okay, image create new true color. This is the same thing we had done here. So this is the actual function that resizes and crops the image. It's the same function that does both. It all depends on what parameters you give it. That's what will determine whether you are cropping or resizing. So the first parameter we need is the destination image, okay, where we are pasting the image from another resource. This one is the source image, the source resource image, which will be pasted here onto the other one. Then destination X and destination Y is where we are beginning to paste. Okay, so now as you know, images have got X and Y. So if we put 0 and 0 there, it means we are starting from the top left corner of the image. Then source X and source Y, this is where we are copying from. Again, we start from the top left corner because we are simply resizing here. We are not cropping anything out, so we get everything. And then the destination width and height and the source width and height. So there's I've typed it here already, image copy resampled to the new image resource from the old image resource. And then this the copy destination X and Y and the source X and Y are all zeros because we are copying everything. The new width and the new height is the destination width and height, and then the original width and height is the source width and height. And as simple as that, this line has resized the image. So the new image resource contains the data that we need right now. So we can simply go and save it. But we can also do a crop right there. So if it's not resize, if it's anything else, just crop the image. Now this part will do both cropping and resizing. It will first resize and then crop. The reason is simple. Imagine you've got an image that's 2000 by 1000, and then you want to reduce it to, let's say, 100 by 50. Okay, so if you simply copy and crop as it is, you're going to get a very tiny piece of the image because this image is quite large. And if you get a 100 by 50 area, that's not going to be good. So what you do instead, you reduce this image to have a minimum of 100 pixels, and then this will reduce to 50, and then you crop it to 50 by 50, like that. So that's what we're trying to do here. We resize first, then we crop. That's much smarter. So let me copy one thing here. So we create a new image resource. New image resource is go to that, and then now here instead, as you can see here, we had created it using new width and new height. But what we are doing here, we are using the maximum width and maximum height, which ideally are the same number. Maybe it's 400 by 400 or 400 by or 600 by 600, so that we create a square image. Okay, so the next thing to do is to let's do some math a little bit here, because we want to know the ratio of reduction first. The same thing we did at the top here. All right. So if height is greater, if the new height, after all this reduction here, the new height which we've created here, if the new height is greater or equal to the maximum height, crop the image in the top and the bottom. So if the new height is greater than the maximum height, it means this image is in portrait shape. It's longer at the top in the height than it is in the width. Okay, so we are going to crop the image in the top and the bottom side. So in order to do that, what we are doing is we are resizing the lowest part of the image. In this case, the width is the lowest, the smallest rather. So we resize the smallest part to the maximum, in this case the width, and then the extra part on the height is what we are trying to calculate here. So the extra part that needs to be cut out is we can find that by getting the original height and removing the maximum height required. Okay, that way we are cropping the top and the bottom of the image. So this Y value is going to be where we are beginning to copy the image from. So the Y is equal to extra, this extra part, that is the extruding part that needs to be cut, divided by 2. Now the reason we are dividing it by 2 because we need to cut the top and the bottom. Okay, so we cut it in half so that we cut a bit of the top and a bit of the bottom, instead of cutting all from the top or all from the bottom. Now we use this function called round to round it off, because we can't have 2 point or 4 point something pixels. Pixels are just integers, so they're not floating point numbers. So we round it off.